Thanks for joining me again. Grumpy Gunsmith here. As you probably noticed in the last few videos, I've been working on a gun for a customer. It's a nice southern, well, Virginia rifle, about 1750 to 1770 period. And this is for a lady out west that's been waiting on this. Her name is Heidi. And since it's for a woman, I wanted to dress it up a little bit. So we're going to do a little bit of silver wire work and a couple of inlays on it, and I'm going to let you watch how I go about doing that. So hang on and let me change the camera around so you can watch what's going on, and we'll get started. Alright, so what we're going to do first is I've got the patch box lid here, and I thought it was kind of plain. So I've got this old silver inlay off a percussion shotgun, and I'm actually going to inlay that in first. And then I've drawn some ideas for some wire work coming out around that. So, well, as you can see, I've been a little busy since you were gone. I decided to go ahead and engrave the inlay and do some of the wire work. And what I'll do next is flip this around, transfer this pattern to the other side, and show you how I did this. See that a little better now. So let me back up a little bit, and what we're going to do is just simply transfer this. And the way I do that is I get a piece of tracing paper, lay it on here, and then just trace the wire design. Trying to do a pretty heavy pencil line, and you'll see why I do that here in just a minute. Alright, now what I'll do is I'll simply flip this over, and what I've got to do now is do the same thing on the other side of the paper. This was the side I drew on. Now I want to draw on the other side the same way. So let me get this out the way. And just get it blank here. Because what I'm trying to do is I want to get the pencil lead graphite on this side now. Okay. Now lay this down right where I want it. Centering it up. And hold it down tightly. And I've got a stylus here that's a little tiny ball on the end of the stylus. And I simply rub it along the lines. Pressing down fairly hard. Not enough to dent the wood, but we need a firm pressure to transfer this design over. Now, if you look carefully, you'll see that it's transferred to the other side. So I've got my pattern now for my wire work. And I can clean that up, you know, a little bit better pencil lines. But now I've got it the same pattern either side. Go ahead and clean this up a little bit. Like that. Now comes the fun part. Got to stab all these lines in to make way for the wire. Okay, it's time to talk about tools. And first thing you're going to need, and these you'll probably have to make like I did. These are the actual chisels you'll use to inlet the wire into the wood. The basic one is just this little 1/8 inch wide, and it's extremely thin. It's almost like a razor on the end. And it is of course heat treated, so it won't break, but it's just a little tiny one. And you can actually use this one for curves as well as straight lines. If you've got a lot of long straight lines, I've taken an old 1/4 inch wood chisel and ground this one, and you can see how thin that blade is. And this one's great for doing straight lines, or even a gentle curve you can do with a chisel like this one. And this one's about a 1/4 inch wide. The next one I did was I got a cheap gouge, wood cutter's gouge, wood chisel, and as you can see I ground it down on the back side to a very thin, paper thin edge on it, and I use this one for doing curves. This one's my larger curves, and I've got another one that does very fine curves. And you'll see me using these, of course, in the video. Next thing you're going to need is a scribe, just some sort of sharp scribe for marking where you want to cut the wire once you've got it measured out. And you'll see me using that. Another tool you'll need is a very sharp cold chisel, and you use this for actually burring the wire. What I mean by burring is you will actually use it to punch on the back or bottom edge of that wire you're going to use, and that creates a very small burr side to side, and that's what holds the wire into the wood once it's wetted and the wood swells up again. Another thing I use is just a little 3/32 pin punch, and I use that for straightening out the wire, especially around curves where you hammer it in you might get a kink or a bulge or something. You can use this to sort of tap it so you get a nice even curve or to straighten up lines that you want straighter. And then when it comes to cutter, what you want is a flush cut tool. You can buy these at places like Michael's. Hobby shops of any type usually have them. It's just a very small, and you get it, don't get the cheapest grade, get a decent one. But it cuts flush. This side is flat, and so you get a good sharp edge on the wire when you cut it. Also got a very small tipped pliers. These are flat pliers, but a very, very fine tip on those. And another very important one is the round needle nose, and you can use this for creating curves in the wire, and you'll see me using that as well. So that's your basic tools, along of course with some sort of lightweight small-fisted hammer. This one's about as large as I want to go in doing wire work. The smaller the better, because you can work next to other wire that you've got in there already, or tap just where you want to on the wire. Now when it comes to wire, I go to Rio Grande, but you can get this stuff from Track of the Wolf too. It's a little bit more expensive, and you can see I use a lot of it. This is 10 thousandths thickness and 30 gauge, same distance, same thing. Some people call it 30 gauge, some people call it 10 thousandths, and according to Rio Grande, this is just what they call bezel wire. And you can see it's fairly wide. It's probably a 1/4 inch or so. So what I do with this stuff is I simply cut it down. I'll take a pair of scissors and cut it right down the center. Doesn't have to be exact, but you want to cut it down the center, and that way you get twice as much wire as what you've bought, which makes it very convenient. I also will get some round wire. This one also came from Rio Grande. This is 18 gauge or 40 thousandths, and I've got it actually in 3 different sizes. This is one of the smallest, then I got 2 of them a little bit thicker, and I use these for doing dots at the end of a tendril or something like that, something decorative. I'll also use this when I'm doing the checkering on the English fowling pieces, and I put little dots in the middle of each of the square check marks on the wrist of the gun. So that's what I use. So that's what you're going to need. I don't know if you can get the round wire from Track of the Wolf. I don't think so. So you would have to go to Rio Grande, and they are a jewelry supply center. So now that we've got all the tools and the basics here, round nose, needle nose, flat needle nose, your trimmer, your basic tools, chisel, punch, scribe, hammer, and there we go. Everything you need to do wire work. So let's get to it, and let's see how we use these tools. And generally I like to start with longer straight lines just so I get a good feel for it. This is my 1/4 inch wide chisel I'm using, and even though this is an arc here on this side, I can still cut a curved line with a straight chisel. And you want to go straight down. You don't want to be in line with the parallel or perpendicular to the wood. Your wire is going to want to go straight down, and that's the way you want to cut. Wiggle it out, put the tip in at the last spot you cut. You want to drive this in fairly deep, because you want to get most of that wire in there. Now I'm going to switch to a smaller one, a little 1/8 inch. And I think I'll use my rounded one here on the tip. Alright, now we get the wire, and the first thing you got to do is notch it. That means taking that cold chisel like I showed you and simply tap it along the edge. I usually do this on a piece of metal, but I'll show you here on this. Just tap it down on the edge, and what you're doing is raising little burrs. You want to get a lot of them in there. You want the whole bottom edge covered with them. And this chisel has to be good and sharp. And not only do you get burrs this way, but you get little burrs on the side. And when you put the wire in the wood and swell the wood up, the wood will swell up around those, and the burrs on the bottom will keep that wire from coming back out again. Alright, that should be enough for this piece. I'll get my nippers because I want to trim the end, and I like to trim it so that it's slightly angled to the bottom side. And it's trying to show you here. So you can see that it's slightly angled so that the part that will be exposed on the top is towards the front. So when it goes in the wood, it'll actually fit a little bit tighter and create a little bit of a edge there that can catch underneath the wood as well when the wood swells up. And I will also file this just put it on my finger and file a little bit to bevel the entire edge so it blends in better instead of having an abrupt end on it. So you feather that a little bit. Now I'm going to take my round nose pliers and start bending this to fit that cutout I just made. When I get it bent so to where I like it, I'll scratch it right on the inside here where the end of that channel is that I just cut. Now I'll trim it at that point. Again, making a slightly beveled edge cut. And I want to feather the edge of this one too by filing it. I'll back up a little bit so you guys can see a little bit better what's going on. Alright. Now it's the fun part. Holding this carefully and making sure that the wire is lined up with the channel, you start lightly tapping it into place. Starting at one end, get it in about halfway and work your way along. Now if it starts to bend on you like that, you have to take your pliers and straighten it up. Lightly tap it down. If it starts to bend on you anywhere, you can take your punch, straighten it up, and that's how you clean up your arcs too, to get everything nice and even. You don't want a wrinkled looking arch. You do the same around the bends. I've got it in probably 3/4 of the thickness of that wire, or the height of it. It's driven in. I like to leave it a little proud. So when I go back and wet it and the wood swells up, then I'll come back and I'll file it until it's almost to the wood, and then finish it off with sanding. So let me do another little piece here real quick, and then I'll wet it and file it and show you how I finish those off. So we'll do this one right next to it. You can see how I'm putting the back corner of that cutter into the previous cut so that it stays in line. Now when it comes to a sharp point like I'm going to be doing here, I do it in 2 pieces and they'll blend together nicely. So I get my wire again. Make sure I got enough burrs on the bottom. One of these days I'm going to make a tool that does this, sort of a roller design. Okay, now I want to trim that front edge again to that bevel. And bend it to fit the cutout. At this end, I'm going to not feather the thickness out because I want those two to butt together. but at the bottom end, down here towards the inlay, I will do that. Trim it off. And feather it out. There we go. Now, here we go. Set the front end in place, start tapping it. It's bending on me, so I got to straighten it again. Go in next to the wire and recut if you need to. Sometimes you'll find that the wire doesn't want to quite go in there because maybe the wood's swollen up a little bit on it. Straighten it up a little bit. Alright, let's see. Let me go ahead and wet this and let that wood swell up a little bit. So let's take another quick break while that dries. Okay, let's see what we got here now that everything's dry. Looks like it did pretty good. I'm going to file this, and when I file, I try and file the length, the longest length, and that way it's less chance of raising any burrs on the edge. When you file it down to the wood with a file, the burrs that can be formed on the edges will actually make the wire look wider or make it look irregular if your burrs are irregular on the surface too. So I just try and file it down until it's just protruding a little bit out of the wood, enough so that I can put some sandpaper like that. Put sandpaper on the file and finish it off, and that reduces any chance of getting burrs on the metal. Just wrap some, this is some 150 paper here. 220 works fine. This is just a little more aggressive. Alright, that's pretty good. So you can see that now that you can rub your fingernail over it and it's not catching on it. It's nice and flush with the wood now. So the next step is to continue on. And I will do that while you folks watch, and I'll probably speed up the camera so that you won't be so bored while I'm doing the rest of this. So hang on, get something cold to drink and a snack, and watch me go at it. I'm going to finish this side up. silver wire inlay. I think the owner will be very happy with that. And once this is stained and finished, it'll be a nice contrast and stand out very nicely. So the next step on this gun will be the final sanding, and I'll show you some tricks about doing that. So until next time, y'all take care out there.